Moving over to the National League East division to my heart here. Who had the best off season? Obviously, let me make the case for the Mets here. They go out, they get Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, bounce back candidates, JD Martinez at the end here, bolstered that lineup. They got like 15 different arms in camps for their bullpen, and some of them are going to pan out, but just getting Jake Diekman and Adam Ottavino to come on back, and Shintaro Fujinami to give you a guy that throws 103 every once in a while. That's actually going to start the season in AAA. Mets definitely got it, right? Come on.
I think so. Yeah, honestly, I do. Like they're not that flashy. I mean, again, JD Martinez, great pickup for, what it was reported at $13 million. That's the fun thing now in baseball, at least, is there's how much money JD Martinez is going to get, 13 million, and then there's how much money the Mets are actually going to pay him, and it's like under $9 million. So, all right, whatever, go figure. But I do like, all the different additions that the Mets made, and I think for the Mets fan base, it's probably getting them a little bit hyped. Like, hey, we might be able to make some noise here in this division. Thankfully, there's 3 wild cards, so all right, we don't have to beat Atlanta or Philadelphia. They could do that job. Philadelphia, they didn't really, well, actually, quite literally, I don't think they made any additions, but they did. They were able to bring back Aaron Nola. That was clutch, right? They were able to extend Zach Wheeler, also incredibly important. So I think they still had a good offseason. But if you want to look at improving from game 162 of last year to game number 1 of this year, the Mets definitely have improved. Vogelback to JD Martinez. Come on, that's night and day.
To be honest, before the JD Martinez, I mean, I was a little bit sarcastic saying it was slam dunk on the Mets, but before the JD Martinez acquisition, I would have said, look, the Mets did a lot to get better than they were, but I still don't know if they're in the playoff mix. JD Martinez actually has me buying into the fact that this season could be a good one for the Mets. The Kodai Senga injury is looming large still, but Luis Severino looked fantastic in camp. I mean, talking about some of these other teams we discussed recording today that needed a pitcher, the Mets land Severino, and looking at all these guys that signed those sort of flyer deals, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Sevy had the best season. Sean Manaea looked really good in spring, so I do like what the Mets did. The Phillies didn't really have to do much, but I guess their big move would have been bringing in Whit Merrifield, so to speak, the thing that makes them different. But it's a utility player. I do like that it gives them sort of a hedge against Johan Rojas. If Rojas isn't hitting at all this year, they could always option him down, play Witt and left, move Marsh back to center. So I do like that. I still think the Phillies are a better team than the Mets, but I don't think their offseason compares. The one team that we can throw out there, though, is the Braves. So the Braves didn't need to do much, but you trade for Jared Kelenic. Hasn't been a great spring. We'll see if that turns into anything, but I think it was a good flyer to take. And then when that's not entirely working out, you hedge that by signing Adam Duvall, which I absolutely love that addition. Not to mention you trade for Chris Sale and you also sign Ronaldo Lopez, who beat out some guys to be the fifth starter. I'm gonna take my Mets bias off for a second. I think the Braves might have the best offseason in this division.
Yeah, and don't forget the Aaron Bummer trade too.
Yep.
You get a guy like that for your bullpen, and Lopez. Yeah, like you said, he's going to start the year in the rotation. But if you do want to use him in the bullpen and bring up one of those young guys in the rotation, so be it. It does give you a ton of flexibility. So yeah, Atlanta didn't need to do very much, and Kelenic, I think the verdict is still out on him. He's young enough where okay, you can hope that he eventually develops into that player that the Mets were initially hoping for when they drafted him. Duvall's a good, fourth outfielder on this team. Probably was his number 3 outfielder for a lot of other clubs that are somewhat middling. So, if Chris Sale truly can be the Chris Sale of old, and he's looked that way, and it's funny how like a New Jersey can just totally change your perspective of a guy, because if we're talking about Chris Sale on the Red Sox, you're like, if he can just kind of have the value of a number 3 pitcher, right? Where maybe he's an ace for half the year and then he's hurt for the other half. Okay, that's something. Or if he's healthy and just not great, he still can be a number 3 on Atlanta's roster. slotting him in at number 4 there behind Charlie Morton. I mean, now you get really excited about that, and the fact that Atlanta didn't really have to give up very much to begin with in a Vaughn Grissom. They already had the infielders right now. Yeah, I think that overall, I don't know that their offseason made them a ton better, but it did, I think, just fortify their depth in a way that really makes them arguably the best team in the National League, which I think is really important now with that first round bye.
I think if you were to look at what they had to do and you identified their holes, you would have said, all right, it's trying to be better in October. And to me, Chris Sale is the definition of that. If he is healthy by the end of the year, and maybe he does miss a chunk of the season in the middle, who knows? But if they get good Chris Sale in the beginning and good Chris Sale at the end, that's going to be massive. Left field was a question mark, and they got the upside in Kellenic and the floor in Duvall. There's some health with Duvall that you have to worry about, but ultimately, if by come playoff time, it's Adam Duvall, Michael Harris, and Ronald Acuna Jr. in the outfield. They were able to win a World Series without Acuna with that mix. So I think they're going to be good. And the capper of it all, just the cherry on top for Alex Anthopoulos, was getting Jesse Chavez to come back on a minor league deal. And that guy makes no sense to me, but every time he'll come in and pitch against the Mets, I see a 1.7 ERA in a Braves uniform in like 35 appearances, and I don't get it. I really don't get it.
He's the Jesse Orosco of this generation. He's just going to be pitching for another decade. And Luis Guillorme. I mean, let's not forget he's gonna be the next superstar. We're
Uh,
talking far too much about the Mets, but also I love the Mets references that I gotta throw your way. That's why you're kind of you're almost hoping that Jared Kelenic doesn't have that big breakout because it's making you a little regretful of the Robinson Cano deal in general. So yeah, Atlanta, got I think a little bit better, but they didn't really need to do very much. It's almost similar to the conversation in the AL West with Josh Hader being that one addition. The Atlanta was able to add 4 or 5 guys that moved the needle, just a little bit more than what they had at the end of last year.
they did, and you're kind of comparing them in this league to the Braves, and to me, the Chris Sale acquisition gives them a rotation that even if the Dodgers rotation everything works out the way they're hoping with Bueller coming back and Yamamoto and all these different things, Tyler Glass not being healthy, if they got into a 7 game series and the Braves had a healthy Sale with Freed and of course Spencer Strider and Charlie Morton. I don't know if there's a playoff rotation in baseball like more than that. So I'm giving it to the Braves as a Mets fan. And I think that alone gives them the edge. Uh, because the Mets, we'll see. We'll see if they get Jordan Montgomery. That's another team that could be in the mix. All of a sudden, I'll change my tune a little bit, but I
For
don't
sure.
know.
Yeah. And we know Washington didn't do anything.
Yeah,
We know, those non-roster guys that were kind of discarded from other clubs, Nick Senzel, maybe you get something there in general. And the Marlins it was really just Tim Anderson. So I think it's Atlanta. I think, Mets deserve a little bit of credit, but not a ton because again, they should be winning by now, right? According to what Uncle Steve said, they should be winning by now. So take that for what it's worth. But I think Philly deserves a little bit of credit too for fortifying their future and locking up Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. Didn't really do anything for the end of last year to the beginning of this, but credit to them for that. Atlanta definitely takes the NL East for the best offseason.